And Sophia didn't mention that I was retired. So I retired in 2019 after 36 years with UC Cooperative Extension, all in Los Angeles. And I continue to live in the LA area down near Long Beach. If any of you are familiar with the Los Angeles area. And I see an error in my email address. I was just going to say, if you have any questions, you can also email me, but the email address is wrong on the title page here. There's an extra U in it. It should be UCANR. There's an extra U and an extra C. So make a note of that. So that it should be just UCANR.edu. When you get to my age, you'll understand how those things happen.
Yeah, I'll send them the correct email address.
Okay. which reminds me, at one of our past seminars, one of your attendees contacted me, and I thought we were going to meet or something, but I can't remember what happened to that. Do you remember who that was?
I believe he's no longer with us.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably why.
That makes sense. Why we never followed up, and I met with him. Okay, very good. Well, this is the fourth time I've had the pleasure of meeting with you folks and talking about some aspect of palms, and we're going to branch off a little bit at the end and talk about when we talk about irrigation, also for palms, but also for trees. So it'll be an interesting presentation, I hope. So if you're really interested in palms, I want to bring your attention to this book that the Western Chapter ISA published. Gosh, it's been 14 years now that I wrote about the biology and management of landscape palms. And I'm not tooting my own horn here. It's just that it's a good book with a lot copiously illustrated, that is primarily a compilation of a series of articles I wrote in Western Arborist 15 years ago. And I don't make one penny off this book. All the money that's made from it goes back into the research fund at Western Chapters. So if you like palms and you want more information, you might be interested in this book. And as Sophia said, I think she said that I have a website. I don't keep it up very well, as much as I should, except for one part of it, which is the top link. There's an electronic journal called Palm Arbor, which is we're in our 10th year now, and I and other authors publish in it, and it has a lot of information on palms and other woody plants. So you may be interested in that journal. And there are some things listed just on the website too, but like I said, I don't keep it up very well as much as I should. Although I'm retired, I'm busier than ever. I can't believe how busy I am. So if you don't want to be busier in your life, don't retire. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's been true for me. So here are these palm pests I want to talk about today. And the first one, the South American palm weevil, I think I talked at another one of our webinars. And so I will go over that one quickly. But the other four, the invasive shot-hole borer, the giant palm borer, the date palm plant hopper, and the red date scale, I don't think I've discussed with you those pests. And the fact that we have them down here means that you might not have them up there yet, although I heard that the invasive shot-hole borer is now in the Bay Area. But you probably don't have these other four, none of these pests there yet. But the fact that they hitch rides on palms, and the fact that we have them down here, means that they could show up in the Bay Area. So it's good to be aware of them. Okay, so this is what the South American palm weevil does. This is in San Diego. It's basically in San Diego County. It's pushing north all the time. It has to jump across about a 15-mile area without many palms, that which is Camp Pendleton between San Diego and San Clemente. But I think it'll eventually broach that sort of natural barrier there and appear in southern Orange County in the not too distant future. So it's moving north all the time. And this is what it does. In fact, it's killed thousands of Canary Island date palms in San Diego, and now it's jumped on to other species because although the Canary Island date palm is the primary host because it's so big and offers so many places for hiding and nesting and breeding, laying eggs, and it has a big apical meristem that they eat, that the larvae eat. Once it finishes off the Canary Island date palms in the area, it'll move to other species. So there's the beetle. It's actually a weevil, which the weevils are characterized by that long snout, which they use for gouging out tissues. And the South American palm weevil is native to tropical America. It's been killing palms in Tijuana, in Baja California, Mexico since 2010. It was trapped in San Diego since 2010, but wasn't actually attacking palms until 2015. It's also been trapped in the Imperial Valley in California and in Arizona and in Texas. As of April 2021, it was as far north as San Marcos. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's up in Oceanside by now, which is the last landscaped area before you get to Camp Pendleton and beyond that, southern Orange County. Its common host is the Canary Island date palm because, like I said, it's so many places, a lot of leaves, a lot of crooks and crannies where the weevil can hide, where it can lay eggs, and it has a big trunk that the larvae can burrow into and feed. The other thing about the South American palm weevil that is often overlooked is that it vectors a disease called red ring disease. It's actually it's actually a nematode, microscopic worm, and that will often kill the palm before the beetle actually or the weevil actually kills it. Fortunately, red ring disease has not yet been detected in the United States, but that's kind of typical of vectored diseases. They often lag behind the frontal boundary of the vector that's spreading. So we can probably expect the red ring disease to be here eventually also. These are some additional palm hosts that they found the South American palm weevil on, Brahia edulis, the Guadalupe palm, Jubea chilensis. There are a few in the Bay Area. Phoenix dactylifera, I've seen them in the Bay Area. Phoenix reclinata, and Sabal bermudana, which is kind of a rare species. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other palms that are now being attacked by the South American palm weevil. So here you see a Canary Island date palm in south of San Diego. And if you look up at the canopy, you see that some of those new leaves, especially about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, look like something's been chewing on them. And that's exactly what's happened. That's the South American palm weevil. So here's a closer view of it. So when those leaves were down in the apical meristem and not yet unfurled, the larvae were tunneling around in there, and they would make galleries periodically across these spike leaves, and that's where that kind of feeding damage. That's when that kind of feeding damage occurred. Sometimes you'll see the tips of the newer leaves truncated. That's also damage from the palm weevil. And notice that you see the damage first on the newer leaves. That's because the larvae that are causing the damage are down in the apical meristem area where the new leaves are being produced. And here's some more, shows the advancing stages of the disease in San Diego. The upper left, you see a Canary Island date palm that looks like the canopy is starting to tilt. And that happens too. You might not see a lot of actual leaf damage, chewing or truncating of leaves, but the burrowing larvae can weaken the stem that's supporting the apical meristem, and the whole top can kind of start leaning. And over in the right, you see a pretty advanced stage of the weevil. Again, it's you always see the damage at the top at the newest leaves, and the palm will die and maintain a skirt of healthy looking green leaves down below before those eventually turn brown also. So here you see another Canary Island date palm, which is probably the apical meristem of this one's probably dead, but it'll retain these green leaves for a while. So again, these truncated leaf tips, sometimes they aren't the tips. Sometimes you'll see sort of a figure 7 carved into the leaf, as you see here, missing pinnae. Base of the petioles often have these grooves, these gouges that the larvae have made, and they're often filled with frass, that fibrous sawdust-like material. In fact, a good place to look first, if you see some visual symptoms up on top of the canopy, is look underneath the palm and look for fallen leaf bases and maybe even some cocoons, and I'll show you those in a minute. So here's what these gouges look like in the leaf base, or petiole. And a pretty advanced, a palm with a pretty advanced infestation. Over on the left is an early stage of the infestation, and over on the right is, of course, a dead palm. So these are the cocoons. They look like shredded wheat, if any of you remember that kind of cereal. Plop that in a bowl and add some milk and raspberries, and you're on your way to a very nutritious breakfast. But those are, you can often find these underneath the palm if it's been infested for quite a while. And there you see a cocoon with a pupa inside. So how do we manage the South American palm weevil? Through sanitation, prompt removal and disposal of infested palms. Proper cultivation is important, meaning water, fertilizer, mulch. It doesn't mean that the palm won't be attacked, but if the palm is attacked and you are able to arrest it and get rid of it, a healthy palm is much more likely to recover better than one that's already stressed from another problem. So avoid wounding palms, because the wounds give off a chemical signal to the adult weevils and it will attract them. The strategy of applying contact pesticides prophylactically, especially after pruning, and to protect valuable specimens, has been employed in areas where palm weevils are active. And then mass trapping with pheromone baits and a pesticide is also another strategy. So if you want to save the palm, you have to get on it right away when you first see signs of infestation, because once it's advanced just a little ways, it's typically too late. So there are some traps you can make your own out of a 3-gallon bucket with some burlap on the outside. And on the lower right is Mark Hodel from UC Riverside, who is really the point person for this infestation. If you've ever heard him speak, he's very enjoyable and has a very, very good sense of humor. And there's a trap. This is down in an area in the Sweetwater River area, just south of San Diego, where there is a riparian area with a lot of wild or naturalized Canary Island date palms that were being killed. And this is how many weevils you can get in one of these traps. This is purportedly the best trap, and these are available commercially. There are a few diseases and disorders that can mimic the South American palm weevil, and they're mainly diseases and disorders that affect the palm where the new leaves are being produced. So again, if you see something on the lower leaves of the canopy, it's probably not the South American palm weevil. It's something else. But all these that I list here, pink rot disease, fusarium wilt, power line pruning, two-tiered canopy, mineral deficiencies. I'm talking about the micronutrient deficiencies here that always appear on the newest leaves first. Planting and transplanting, and then water stress. We saw water stress palms prior to 2022-23 winter, and we thought they could be the palm weevil, but it turned out it was just water stress. So again, these diseases and disorders that can mimic the South American palm weevil appear on the newest leaves, like the South American palm weevil. So if you see things on the lower leaves in the canopy, it's probably not the South American palm weevil. Okay, the invasive shot-hole borer. This is another beetle that also vectors a disease. In this case, it's a fusarium disease caused by the fungus fusarium, and it causes dieback on trees and shrubs and other woody plants. And it has been attacking palms. And we used to call it the polyphagus shot-hole borer, but then a second nearly identical species of beetle was discovered in San Diego, and that one could only be distinguished from the first one by looking at its DNA. So they just lumped them together and called them the invasive shot-hole borers. And they've been attacking a wide variety of trees for more than 15 years now in Southern California. And like I said, I heard that it was detected in the Bay Area recently. It has a wide host list. It attacks over 200 woody species, including some palms. And it does vector a fungal complex that causes fusarium dieback. And the fusarium dieback attacks over nearly 140 species of woody plants, including a few palms. So just because you have the invasive shot-hole borer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the fusarium also, but there's a good chance that you will. And the fusarium grows in the galleries that the borer makes, and then the larvae feed off that fusarium. So it's there for a reason. That the beetle carries it with it for a reason. It's food for the larvae. So the beetle's name is U. wallacea, and I put species SPP because there's more than one species involved, and it causes this fusarium dieback, which is actually a complex of fungi, but the primary one is fusarium, and that's why it's called the fusarium dieback. But graphium and paracremonium are also present. Those are other fungi. So the female beetles are very small and black, less than 1/10 of an inch long. The males are wingless and smaller and not black, they're brown. The fungi-carrying females land on a host, bore into the wood, lay eggs, and inoculate the area with the fusarium complex. The larvae feed on the fungi. And mature siblings mate, fungi-carrying pregnant females depart through the entry hole made by their mothers, and they spread to another susceptible host. This is a tropical beetle. It's most active in the summer, and in Southern California, at least during the summer, is when populations and damage can spike. When this beetle was first detected on, I think it was avocado trees in Los Angeles County, there was near hysteria about it. And when it started attacking multiple hosts, everybody, not everybody, but many people were saying it was the end of the urban forest as we know it in Southern California. Well, that didn't turn out to be true. In a lot of cases where you have an invasive species, after the first wave comes through, it tends to plateau out or drop to another level and is not quite as bad. And we think that's because probably some predators find it and get onto it eventually. So fortunately, it didn't turn out to be the end of the urban forest. So these are what the beetles look like. I put some tape over some entry holes, and after a few days came back, and you can see that the beetles were trying to migrate out of this palm via one of the exit entry holes, and they got trapped on the tape. So that's what they look like. So 3 possible scenarios happen with this invasive shot hole borer. The host can repel the shot hole borer without a fungal infection. The shot hole borer successfully bores into the host trunk, spreads the fungus, but does not produce offspring. Or 3, the shot hole borer successfully bores into the host trunk, spreads the fungi, and produces offspring. So the third scenario is the most serious, and we call those reproductive hosts.
Dawn, you accidentally muted yourself, so we can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it was just right at the start of this slide.
Oh, this slide. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so they make small, precise entry holes, very neat, as if a drill had done it. And there's often some gumming or stained or darkened surface tissues adjacent to the hole. And sometimes you'll find fine sawdust-like frass. However, there is no whitish, sugary exudate, as is common in non-palm woody plants. If you see this shot hole borer on oaks and other non-palms, there's typically a whitish, sugary exudate surrounding the entry hole, but we haven't seen that on palms. I have to keep muting it. I don't know why that is. Okay, so here's a shot hole borer. You can see the small holes. This is in a Kentia palm, which is a palm that's probably not too common in the landscape in the Bay Area. I know there are some there, but you might see it much more commonly inside office buildings. So you can see those small holes, and there is some frass around these holes. Enter, it's muting. That's strange. Okay, here's some here's another Kentia palm, Howea forceriana. It has a lot more frass on the trunk. So you see these where there's a clear trunk, typically. And there's a lot of frass on this one. If the fungi successfully colonizes the palm, the wood turns dark brown to black surrounding the galleries. And you can see white fungal mycelia sometimes inside these galleries. However, typical wilt symptoms and eventual palm death have not yet been attributed to the ficus dieback in palms. There's a possibility, however, that the mechanical damage made by the beetle boring into it could allow other diseases to enter, like pink rot or Theolabiopsis. So here's a palm that we took down in Orange County that was heavily infested. And on the photo on the left, you see the dark areas, and you can actually see some galleries that have been severed when we cut this palm up. And you notice that the general dark area of the tissue that surrounds the I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see the cursor? Yeah, so you can see this margin here. So this is all consumed with the Fusarium complex of fungi. And here's a close-up of some of these galleries, and you notice how the tissue right around them is dark from the Fusarium. And there's, at the tip of that knife, you can see a larva of the shothole borer. So actually, palms have trunks that are very good at stopping advancing infections. That's because they have very strong fibers in them. And I think I went over that during one of our first meetings where I talked about briefly about the biology of palms. So they don't have a vascular cambium that encircles the trunk. They have separate phloem and xylem tissues, and they're each combined in small bundles, and these are scattered across the palm trunk. So, and they're very resistant to decay. There's a close-up view of some galleries with the white Fusarium complex fungi in them. This was a species of Dipsus, the Areca palm. Now it's called Chrysalidocarpus. That a species is susceptible to the invasive shothole borer and even the ficus dieback does not necessarily mean it will die. It will always show symptoms or die. Why some members of the same species die while others continue to thrive is not well understood. So using these avocado trees as an example, in 2000, I think it was 2010, I looked at heavily infested avocado trees in Long Beach. And this was at the beginning of the hysteria about shothole borer. And in Arcadia at the Arboretum on Coast Live Oak. And the pronouncement was that, oh, these trees don't have long to live. Well, the trees are still alive today, and you can barely tell that they were ever attacked. So fortunately, they didn't die. And as to why some of them didn't, that hasn't been resolved yet. So the shothole borer currently attacks 10 palm species, and it looks like 4 of these are susceptible to the Fusarium dieback. So here are the 10 palm species. King palms you might have up in the Bay Area. I know you have Mexican blue palms, Pindo palms, Cocothrinax, probably no, or maybe a few collectors in the Bay Area have them growing. Dipsus plumosa, which is now Chrysalidocarpus, that was the Dipsus from which I was showing you that was the palm from which I was showing you the photos of the galleries. Kentia palm, Chinese fan palm, California fan palm. I know that there's probably some of those in the Bay Area. And the foxtail palm, which Home Depot has a habit of selling those. So if Home Depot's selling them, they might show up in the Bay Area. So these are what these palms look like. That's Brahia armata on the left and Budia odorata on the right. Cocothrinax argentea on the left. Dipsis plumosa on the right. Kind of looks, Dipsis plumosa sort of looks like a queen palm. Wallachia distica, Woodyetia bifurcata. King palm on the left and Kentia palm on the right. Chinese fan palm on the left and Washingtonia foliifera on the right, California fan palm. Okay, the giant palm borer, Dinapate wrightii. This borer attacks a native California fan palm in its desert habitat in the Coachella Valley. It evolved with the California fan palm, so it occurs naturally with these palms and primarily attacks stressed, diseased, and dying palms. It was nature's way of culling out these weakened specimens from the population. However, it occasionally attacks, it comes out of the natural populations in the Coachella Valley and attacks cultivated fan palms and date palms in the landscape. So it could be carried north to the Bay Area. So this is what it looks like, the damage you see on date palms, Phoenix dactylifera, in the landscape. And these weren't well irrigated, so they were more attractive to the giant palm borer. Infested trunk typically has pretty large exit holes, and these are often plugged with sawdust and fraст. Palms can fail and fall, die, or live on, but in a stress condition. So it's not just because this borer enters the palm doesn't mean it's that palm is completely doomed. So again, it's we're not sure exactly why. So there's a Phoenix dactylifera trunk showing the exit. They're pretty large. I could stick my index finger in those. So compared to the shot-hole borer, they're very large. And here you see them plugged with the frass. I guess, yeah, you see them plugged with the frass. The black beetles are about 2 inches long. They fly to stress, dying, or even or diseased palms. Females burrow into the leaf bases. They construct nest chambers and mate. The larvae burrow all throughout the palm, including the trunk and apical meristem, sometimes for years before any damage is noticed. There's a larva of one in a date palm, and there's the adult. So it's different from a weevil. Doesn't have that long snout. So the way to manage the giant palm borer is maintain palms in a healthy and vigorous state, paying particular attention to appropriate irrigation, nutrition, and transplanting practices. So we don't want to stress the palm because then it becomes like a magnet for these borers. There are some natural predators of the giant palm borer, including birds like the common flicker and the ladder-backed and Gila woodpeckers. That might be good in the Coachella Valley. I'm not sure if those birds would be elsewhere. if, for example, up in the Bay Area, a California fan palm showed up that was brought in for landscaping, showed up with a giant palm borer in it. So in those cases, you might have to rely on a systemic pesticide applied to the root zone so that the palm takes it up inside its.
Are there any systemic pesticides that have been shown to be successful after
Well,
infestation?
yes, imidacloprid and dinotefuran
All right.
have been on the South American palm weevil. So I would assume it work on the giant palm borer also.
Yeah, similar.
But again, you'd have, because they take a while to move up into the palm. You got to get on it right away. Or if you were maintaining a landscape, especially a high-end landscape, and this beetle or the borers were in the vicinity, you might want to consider prophylactically treating the palms with a systemic material. And actually a canopy spray, because a contact spray in case there are any up in the foliage. But the best long-term solution is probably a systemic.
Yeah, that's easier to apply as well. All right.
Thank you. I know in Southern Europe and the Mediterranean, where they're dealing with another kind of palm borer, the red palm weevil, which is closely related to the South American palm borer, weevil, I mean. They actually, on very choice specimens like the Jubea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm, they'll actually run a pipe up into the canopy of the palm, put a spray head on it, and down below they have a quick coupler release. And they just drive or bring up a tank full of pesticide, quick couple it, spray it for 30 or 40 seconds, drenching the canopy area. And that's how they've prevented these really choice palms from being infested. But again, it requires repeated applications, something that I'm not sure we want to do in the landscape. Okay, a little plant hopper called the date palm plant hopper, which can be a problem on date palms, Phoenix dactylifera, but it's mainly on Phoenix robelini, the pygmy date palm, at least in our landscape. And it gets way down in the emerging leaves, and the feeding damage from the hopper makes the leaves, gives them yellow spots. You don't see it until the leaves unfurl. By that time, the weevil's not there anymore. It's still down deeper inside. Not the weevil, the hopper. And the yellow spotting you see later. As I said, it's primarily on Phoenix robelini, sometimes Phoenix dactylifera. It mostly feeds on unopened developing leaves, resulting in yellow spots as the leaf unfolds. And if you get your hands down there and kind of spread those leaves apart, you'll sometimes see honeydew, which attracts ants and can make sooty mold, and also some frass. So this is what happened when I pulled leaves quite a ways apart. You'll see different life stages. You'll see ants, and there was some honeydew down in there. This is Phoenix robelini, and of course yellow spots once the leaves emerge. Okay, for that leaf for this leaf hopper, excuse me, it's best to keep the palms growing in a healthy manner, and I think this might be able to control it with a foliar spray, just making sure that you get the material way down in the base of the leaves in the center of the plant. I think it'd be easy to control because it's not inside the plant, it's on the outside, as opposed to the borers and the weevils being inside the plant. Okay, red date scale is kind of a new pest for me. I've heard people talking about it down here, and it's called red date scale because the scale itself is red, but it surrounds itself with this white waxy material, and that's what you typically see first. You don't actually see the red scale itself. You see all the white waxy material, thinking, oh, maybe I have a mealybug, but it's actually the red date scale. So it originated in North Africa and the Middle East, and it arrived on date offshoots that were being brought into the U.S. to establish the date industry in the late 19th and early 20th century. They're typically hidden deep down at the base of leaves and or in the leaflet folds along the rachis of the leaf. And they produce copious white waxy cottony material like mealybugs do, in which they hide. And as I said, the material is actually more conspicuous to you than the actual scale. The adult females are best for identification. They're small, very small, 400ths to 600ths of an inch long. They're spherical and they're red to reddish brown. But again, you'll see the white waxy cottony material first. So the hosts are primarily phoenix, including Canariensis, Dactylifera, Reclinata, and Robelinii, and Washingtonia foliifera. It also goes on some non-palm hosts like Pandanus and Eucalyptus, and seems to be more prevalent on already stressed palms. So palms that are stressed because of nutritional issues, irrigation issues, other disease or pest issues tend to harbor larger populations of the red date scale. Damage is primarily a decrease in normal plant metabolism. So you see poor color, stunting, and loss of vigor, which could be due to any number of pest diseases and disorders. As other symptoms are chlorosis and necrosis, premature leaf senescence, rarely death. But these other symptoms mimic a lot of symptoms from other problems on palms, pest diseases and disorders. And one of my colleagues, Paul Santos with Plant Pulse Diagnostics down here, thinks that the Dotheriella, which is kind of a opportunistic fungus, might be facilitated by the damage that the red date scale does. The red date scale might facilitate the entry of Dotheriella. So that's an interesting proposition. So here you see, these are all on Canary Island date palms, and they're from Paul Santos. Damage, you look at the base of these leaflets where they're folded, you'll see the white in there, and if we looked carefully in there, you'll see the little red scales. And over on the right, you see leaves that haven't even really unfurled yet, but they're heavily infested with the date scale. So these are the signs you would see. And here you actually see some of the red date scales. So as with all if you have the luxury of bringing palms into a site, thoroughly inspect them prior to them arriving. This goes not only for the red date scale, but also for the borers and the weevils. You can't find everyone, but a thorough inspection would help to prevent it from entering the landscape. thorough, regular monitoring, and because they're scales and they produce sugary exudate, control ants, because ants protect these sap-sucking insects from predators. And that's because the ants are kind of farming them and collecting the sweet honeydew. Sometimes a strong stream of water can dislodge and wash away scale infestations, but you got to get way down in all the nooks and crannies, which is difficult. Encourage and promote beneficials. There are some predaceous mites and some predaceous beetles that feed on the scale. If you're looking at pesticides, try horticultural oils and insecticidal soaps first. They're the least damaging to the environment, and they can offer some control. And then contact insecticides and systemic insecticides. Okay, so palm pest summary. Minimize plant stress and maximize palm health and vigor. In many cases, that doesn't mean that the palm won't be attacked, but if you're successful in fending off the attack, a healthy, vigorously growing palm will recover more quickly. Appropriate irrigation, nutrition, mulch, and light. Practice exclusion. Scout frequently, be vigilant. Use yellow sticky cards to monitor pest populations. And when infestations are first noticed, if you can, cut them out, or if you have to, remove the palm and send it to a landfill. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, how about 10?
Yeah, we are
How about
scheduled to
10
go
minutes?
until 9:30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we can, there's some more on palm pest summary. I think I've kind of covered that. So I want to talk about irrigating landscape palms and trees. And many people don't realize that landscape water use in California accounts for only 9% of the statewide total of all the water used. That surprises a lot of people. And I actually think 9% is high, because for many years it was 4 to 6%. And then when our one of our worst droughts came in 2015, 2016, 2014, it almost doubled to 9%. And I think that was because the powers that be wanted to make a stronger case about clamping down on landscape water use. So that 9% can be divided into residential, which is 7%, and then the large landscapes like parks, golf course, and sports fields, about 2%. So here's a diagram showing where most of the water goes is agriculture, which is almost 80% of the water used in California. And I'm not complaining about that. I like to eat. So I like to see food on my plate. But obviously there's a lot of areas where agriculture can tighten up its water use. And they have been doing that. And they could make the most savings probably in agriculture in terms of total quantity of water saved, and they're doing that. But we can't. The idea that we can just neglect the landscape is kind of short-sighted, because here are some amenities and benefits that trees and landscape provide to us. And if we just let the landscape go to hell in a handbasket, we would be really hurting in many ways. And you can see them listed here, and I'm sure there are others. And it would be expensive. So a recent Canadian study found that having 10 or more trees on a typical city block on average improved the sense of well-being in ways comparable to an increase in annual personal income of $10,000. and moving to a neighborhood with a $10,000 higher median income, or being 7 years younger. Who can complain with that? It's expensive not to irrigate. So there are some direct costs, like when you don't irrigate, landscape plants will die. So clean up dead and dying trees, retrofitting irrigation systems, and replanting could be enormous costs. And then there are indirect hidden costs like lawsuits, increased fire risk, loss of environmental energy benefits, and job loss and reduced economic activity. So the idea that we should just shut the water off to the landscape, I've always opposed that. I think irrigating the landscape is a critical part of our lives in our society, and we should continue to do it, but we have to do it in a very responsible and appropriate way. So research that University of California has done over the past 30 years shows that appropriate landscape water management can substantially reduce water use up to 30% or more, which would meet most of the mandated cutback goals and yet still retain our trees and other land plants. So how do we do this? Well, tree selection and planting are really important. The right species for the right spot. So in Southern California, that means low water use plants. What are low water use plants? Well, California natives are, and so are Mediterranean climate plants, because California has a Mediterranean climate, one with cool, hopefully moist winters, and warm to hot, rainless summers. Plants from a similar climate around the world tend to grow well here. So appropriate species are environmentally well adapted, and they fit the intended landscape use. Plant it correctly, plant it grade, no organic matter in the backfill. I mean, that surprises a lot of people, but studies have shown that incorporating organic matter in the backfill doesn't help at all, and actually can be detrimental. Apply mulch and water judiciously. So what is judicious irrigation? Well, there are a couple of ways to do this. One is the 12-2 rule, and I will take responsibility for this. I sometimes call it the Hodel rule of thumb when it comes to irrigating. And that is the goal is to moisten the upper 12 inches of the root zone at each irrigation event. Okay. So that's what we want to do. The next question is, well, when do we do that? Well, when the upper 12 inches of soil reaches 50% depletion, then irrigate again to moisten the upper 12 inches of soil. So what's 50% depletion? Well, this is where my rule of thumb comes in. If you dig down below the soil surface and 1 to 2 inches deep, it turned dry, then it's time to irrigate. That's pretty close to 50% depletion. It's close enough. So you don't irrigate again until the upper 12 inches of soil reaches 50% depletion. So you have to become intimately involved with your landscape, with the soil, looking at it, digging down, and after a while, this will become second nature to you. There's another way to do it, and this is called precision scheduling, where you use real-time or historic evapotranspiration rates, which are available online. Even real-time data is available through this CIMMYS irrigation and management system, which is a network of computer-driven weather stations around California that generate daily ET rates. And we use that with a crop or species factor, which is a % of ET for the site. And then when the daily crop or species ET accumulates to 50% of soil moisture in the upper foot, then it's time to irrigate. So if we track daily ET, say we had a sandy soil which holds about 1 inch of water per foot. When daily ET accumulated to 0.5 inch, 0.5, then we would irrigate and apply that 0.5 back on the the soil. So say on a cool day in the Bay Area, or maybe maybe on an average day in the Bay Area, maybe daily ET is 0.1 inch. So after 5 days of 0.1 inch, you'd reach that ½ inch, and then it's time to reapply it to the zone. If you're in Sacramento in the summertime, you might have a daily ET of 0.25 inches, which means it would only take 2 days to accumulate that ½ inch. So that's when you would apply it. Now, clay soils hold 2 to 3 inches of water per foot of soil, so you can wait longer between irrigation events, but then you have to apply more at each irrigation event also. So those are 2 ways to do it, the Hodel rule of thumb and using evapotranspiration data. Some of you may be familiar with ET data already, and maybe you know people who use it, or you're using it. I'm not sure. So appropriate application includes water to the root zone, the correct amount, applied with no waste or runoff. And to do this, I think microsystems are best. We're talking about drip or micro sprayers here. So 3 basic principles of landscape irrigation: improve system performance, improve irrigation and water management practices, adjust plant care practices. So that's really important. So pruning at the right time, avoid excessive fertilizer, using mulch are all important. So there are some poorly crafted water conservation rules out there, like 2 days per week, 15-minute runtime per station. Some of these are horticulturally unsound. They don't take into account sprinkler precipitation rates, soil types, soil infiltration rates, especially soil water holding capacity, plant type, rooting depth, and evapotranspiration rates. So this used to always irk me when we were powers that be were telling us how to water plants, when they don't know how to water plants. They never worked around plants. They have no knowledge or experience like you folks do. Okay. So I think I can end here because I'm sure we're at 9:30 now. Just take home messages. Trees are essential components of our landscape. And we have the research to show that we can have our trees and save a significant amount of water and still meet the water restrictions. And landscape industries have been leaders in judicious irrigation. And trees and landscapes are worth every drop of water and every penny we spend on them because they bring so many amenities and benefits to us. All right. I wanted to try to finish on time. I had a lot of material to cover, and can we take questions for a few minutes?
Yeah, we are opening up for questions. I know someone had to hop off to run to an appointment, but we finished right on time.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves, just chat. Thank you, Don, for another very informative webinar. I liked all the pictures of the past. I love your Hodel rule of thumb for watering, because clients, you can tell them a bunch of things and it just goes over their head. If you tell them something tangible and something very simple, they're like, got it. Because we plant the trees, but we don't really water them, so it's up to them.
Yeah, I think the act of getting down and actually putting your hands in the soil is very valuable, and I think it brings people into closer contact with the plant. And if you know the soil well and know your plant well, irrigating plants becomes second nature, and how to irrigate them appropriately becomes second nature.
I don't see questions popping up from the others. I do have one, though that this is probably a whole nother conversation on its own. But for kind of a rule of thumb thing, when you say like water until the top 12 inches of soil are wet, like, is there a guideline for how many gallons for like sandy
Well,
soil, clay soil, small trees
yeah,
versus,
yes.
mature trees, that kind of a whole
So
nother set of rules of thumb.
yeah, well, because we know how much water each of those soil types holds per foot. Like I said, a sand holds about an inch of water per foot. A clay soil holds 2 to 3 inches of water per foot. And a loam would hold about an inch and a half to 2 inches of water per foot. So if that soil completely dried down, we'd have to apply for a sand an inch to completely moisten that upper foot. But typically the soils don't dry down completely. In fact, we don't want them to dry down completely. We want them to dry down to 50%. And then we want to reapply that 50% back on. So on a sand soil, that'd be 50%. And you would know how much water is going on if you have a sprinkler system. You can set out some flat bottom, straight sided cans and run your system for say 15 minutes and measure the depth of water in those cans. And that would tell you your precipitation rate. So if those cans were putting on a 1/4 inch and if they had a 1/4 inch of water in them after 15 minutes, you'd know that the precipitation rate of your system is about an inch per hour. And so you would know how long to run it to apply a 1/2 inch. That'd be 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
same way with clay soils. If you got a clay soil, which I actually grew up working with a clay soil in the LA area. And actually now I live on a deep alluvial soil where you can sink a shovel in. It's very sandy loam, sink a shovel in with hardly any weight. But I grew up on a clay soil. And I didn't mind. I don't mind it. It just means that you have to manage it a little bit differently, and realize it holds more water, way more water per foot. It takes longer to get that water in, and you don't have to water as frequently because it holds more water. So drip systems, you can also determine those. Many of the drip emitters give out about a gallon per hour, or nearly a gallon per hour, and you can figure out how many square feet a gallon will cover to a certain depth. I think there are 8.5 gallons per cubic foot. So if you put on a gallon, that'll tell you how much of that, through simple math, figure out how many how much that will cover. So yeah, there's a method to this madness.
Yes, I've heard some other talks with Igor Leakin, I think. He's also with the UC Cooperative Extension up here. He's done some talks on irrigation. I will dig around.
I know him. He's very good. So he has a lot of good information.
Well, I don't see any other questions
Okay.
right now. But yeah, thank you again for the
Okay.
talk and spending the time putting the list together and joining us this morning. Thank you everyone for hopping on, spending an hour of your time with us.
And if people if they have questions, they can email me.
Of course, yes. And I will send them the contact info, your contact info, the slides, the recording.
Okay.
I know some other people wanted to jump on, but they got last minute calls, so they will be going back and watching the recording.
Okay.
All right. Well,
all right. Well, it was a pleasure as usual, Sophia. So
our pleasure.
okay.
All right. Thank you, Don. Have a good one. And thank you, everyone. Drive safe if you're driving. Have a good day. Stay cool or stay warm wherever you are, whatever the weather is like. Have a good one and a good rest of your week. I will let you guys go.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
My
Don.
pleasure.
Sophia.
Thank you, Don.